Hello and welcome to UO Today. I'm Barbara Altmann, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Our guest today is Frances White, an Associate Professor in the UO Department of Anthropology and the Director of the Institute of Cognitive and Decision Sciences. Professor White's research focuses on the ecological and social factors important in the evolution of primate social systems. She studies wild bonobos and wild and captive populations of lemurs. On April 14th, she will be giving a lecture entitled Make Love, Not War: What Chimpanzees Can Tell Us About the Evolution of Human Behavior. That lecture is part of the Darwin Bicentennial Series co-sponsored by the Oregon Humanities Center. Frances, welcome to UO Today.
Thank you.
We're really looking forward to your lecture. I'm sure it will draw a big crowd. And thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us in this format as well.
Oh, you're welcome.
I think I'd like to jump right in and ask you about these beautiful creatures called the bonobo. I'm fascinated, first of all, by the name of this animal. Could you tell us how they ended up being called bonobo?
Well, it's a relatively recent name that they've acquired. They originally were called pygmy chimpanzees, and for a very long time they were just known as pygmy chimpanzees and thought to be just a smaller version of the chimpanzee that's found south of the Congo River. But after they'd been studied for a while, it became clear that they were very different, and it was felt by a fair number of people that they should have a name that distinguishes them from chimpanzees. And also, pygmy was a mistake. They're not small chimpanzees. In fact, they're the same body size as the best studied of the chimpanzees. So they're not small, they're not pygmies. They were thought to be pygmies because the skull that was used to describe the species is the smallest skull of an adult that has ever been found. So being described from one small individual made people think they were pygmy versions. And the word bonobo sort of emerged, especially in Europe, for a really African-sounding name for the species. The problem is it's not an African word. It is not known in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where I work. It is not one of the native and local languages. It's not a local trading language either. It's thought to be a mispronunciation of the word bonobo, and bonobo was stamped on the crate that this first skull came to Europe. It came to the Touver Museum in Belgium. And bonobo is the shipping port that the skeleton was sent to Europe from. So it sort of became their name because it sounded African, it was associated with the first skeleton. And now it's sort of going back the other way in that people are educating the Congolese to call them bonobos, to distinguish them from chimpanzees, because chimpanzees live in Congo as well as bonobos, so they have both.
It's a great story of a made-up name
for something that
needed its own designation.
Yes.
So how do they actually differ from the species of chimpanzees that we would be most familiar with?
Well, if you saw one, you would say it was a chimpanzee to start with. They look like chimpanzees, but they don't sound like chimpanzees, so they sound very different. Their differences in body shape are fairly subtle, so they have a distinctive hairstyle that's parted in the center, and they have small ears that are sort of hidden behind this fluff of hair that comes out on their sides of their heads. Then their faces are black. All chimpanzees, when they're adult, tend to have black faces, but their skin, in a chimpanzee, they're born with pale skin, and it tans during their lifetime and turns darker as they age. But bonobos are born with black skin, so that they look very different as infants. They also have a few other features, like they have a little tail tuft, that little white tail tuft, sort of just a tiny little bit of fur right on their rear ends. That chimpanzees also have that as juveniles, but they lose it as an adult. But in a bonobo, it lasts through to the adult. And the other things are the shape of the body. So they tend to be longer limbed and thinner in the trunk, more suited to being up in the trees. And chimpanzees are sort of stockier and heavier and more suited to being down on the ground.
There's a wonderful publicity photo that you sent us that has a bonobo hugging you, wrapped around your head.
Yes.
They look like they are affectionate.
They are very affectionate. They're much more affectionate than chimpanzees. Chimpanzees can be a bit difficult to be around and can be quite aggressive, but bonobos aren't. And that's one of the things that's really different about them is their social system. So bonobos have a very different social system to chimpanzees, and it shows in their affection towards people. They're being described as more emotional and more sensual rather than different in sort of intelligence or anything like that, but more feeling and more caring.
And quite observant. I believe I read in one of your pieces that they have a great degree of awareness of each other or of people observing them as well.
They do. They react to us. I mean, they've learned us as individuals, and they always know when I bring a new student in, they'll always react to that new person as someone strange that they don't know. But they're always aware of us, and when we're watching them or following them, they always know that we're with them.
I know that the social system is the major piece of your work, perhaps, on the bonobos, and I'd like to get to that in a moment. But I wanted to ask you first, just because we humans seem to have an insatiable curiosity about these lovely little fellows. Your research interests include human ecology and evolution, so you must be able to explain. People often ask you what the relationship is between humans and bonobos. How closely are we related?
Well, we're the same relationship between us and bonobos as between us and chimpanzees. But chimpanzees and bonobos are more closely related to each other than either of them is to us. So they split apart as species about 2 to 2.5 million years ago. And humans split from chimpanzees somewhere between 5 to 6 million years ago. So that they're sort of like close cousins, and both of them are more distant cousins. They are our closest relatives, but the two of them are sort of like opposite ends of what we could be in terms of thinking about our ancestral relationships.
Now, in one of your big discoveries, one of the major points, I believe, of your research, if I understand it correctly, is that bonobo society privileges the female.
That's right, yes.
Could you explain that?
Sure. Well, if we start from a chimpanzee, chimpanzees are a male-dominant society. So an individual male will outrank an individual female. And it means the males feed first, they take the first choice of everything that they want. They'll be aggressive towards females, they'll hit them, they'll hurt them, they'll attack them. And the females basically take a subservient role to the males and try to avoid them a lot of the time. And males also band together in these very aggressive groups. So male chimpanzees are also male bonded. The males cooperate and form very strong friendships among each other, that they work as a group to defend a range that contains females, but also to go outside that range and attack neighboring groups. So chimpanzees conduct lethal raids on the neighbors, killing neighboring chimpanzees. And bonobos are sort of almost like the complete opposite of that. So in bonobo society, males do not form strong friendships with other males. The strongest friendship a male has is usually with females or with his mother, if his mother is still in the group. And the main social ties are among all the females. So the females are highly social with each other, form very strong friendships, and they groom each other. They do a behavior which we call GG rubbing, or genital rubbing, which is a sociosexual behavior between females, where they rub their genitals together as a form of friendship and form these really tight friendships and alliances that essentially give them power in the society. So if you had one bonobo male against a bonobo female, the male would win if it was just a dispute. But the female is never on her own. She always has her group of friends with her. And what that tends to do is make the female more powerful, and males never aggress against females. Or if they do, it's sort of a show of aggression and the females just ignore it.
I think I read also, correct me if this is wrong, but those tight friendships that develop between females are not necessarily kinship-based either.
They're not kin-based at all. In fact, it's interesting because chimpanzees, those male bonds, those male groups are related males. In bonobos, the males are also related, but they don't form those friendships. They don't form those close ties. And just like in chimpanzees, the females are not related to each other. So it's one of the very rare cases in primates where you've got close cooperative bonds among females, where the females are all unrelated to each other.
You've already mentioned one form of their sexual behavior. You said social sexual behavior. Could you elaborate a little bit on the role that sex plays in their kind of social system?
Sex essentially is for social bonding. So it's like an extension of grooming, so that they groom each other a lot, but they'll also have these sexual interactions. And you see them mostly among females. And it can be related to how important a female is. So a female who is very important in the social group, which usually means an older female who has lots of offspring, will be asked to Gigi rub by younger females all the time. So they're sort of constantly going up to her and saying, would you like to Gigi rub? And sometimes she says yes, and sometimes she says no. But they sort of negotiate who's going to Gigi rub in a fairly friendly way. And then you have sexual behavior, sexual interactions that can happen among any group and any partnership. So there are male-male sexual interactions. There are two main ones that we tend to see. One is the one that happens between adult males, less of a friendly bonding so much as after a fight, making up after an argument. So if there's a dispute between males, afterwards they do this sexual behavior which we call rump-rump touching or rump-rump rubbing, which just looks very strange, but two males back towards each other and rub their rumps together. And the other one is a friendly social interaction among juvenile and young males, which is probably descriptive enough. We call it penis fencing.
And yes, that's pretty self-descriptive.
And it's a play behavior that's among males.
Hence the title of your talk, Make Love, Not War.
Yes.
I believe the conclusion you draw from this, the prevalence of sexual activity, is that perhaps that's one of the reasons that makes them a more peaceable social system?
It's very much that a lot of their social interactions are geared to friendships and not to aggression. So that where in chimpanzees you have a lot of competition and aggression, in bonobos you have a lot of friendship and affiliation, and sexual interactions are part of that. So you get a lot of mating between males and females. So the female is sexually active throughout her sexual cycle and throughout her reproductive cycle. So she will mate with males even though she's not ovulating. There's no chance of her getting pregnant. She still has a high frequency of mating behavior. But it's more of a social interaction than it is a reproductive behavior. And you get the same sorts of interactions where if males are starting to get aggressive, females will mate with them and the male will calm down. And it's part of, we used to call it, when we started talking, the researchers, we used to discuss the importance of sexual behavior in bonobos. We decided it was best described as the lubricant, which kept the social tension down and allowed individuals to work together.
Does that mean that you can hypothesize about reconciliation and peacemaking in other species?
I think the way that I would put it is that the relationship between the social system is more to do with the ecology and the competition that individuals are experiencing. So in chimpanzees, as the opposite sort of case, where females are not friendly with each other, their food comes in small patches and it's fairly spread out. And there's not enough food in any one place for a group of females to share. So that another female is looked on as a competitor rather than as a friend. And that means the females are all scattered. And females typically move away from each other. They don't spend a lot of time together. And that then allows the males to form these tight bonds, these tight groups that can patrol a big area that contains a lot of these scattered females. In other words, for a chimpanzee, it makes sense to work with other males to get more females together as a group. And you're working with your brothers and your uncles and your nephews, so they're relatives that are all sharing the access to these females. In bonobos, because bonobos are only found right in the center part of the Congo Basin in a really rich habitat, which doesn't have a strong dry season, doesn't have strong seasonality, the habitat is always very, very productive, and there's always a lot of food and a lot of fruit. And the fruit trees are bigger. They just contain more food. There's always more food available. So the females don't look on as other females as competitors. In fact, females now become helpers because you form a group of females together and you work together. What you can now do is actually keep other females out of your fruit tree. So that you need a group that works together to protect your food source. Now, what does that do to the males? Well, the males now have, instead of having scattered females, they have groups of females that are sticking together. And from a male's perspective, it's now better to be the one male that's with this group of females. So by basically what happens is you change the way the food comes, you change the way the females are organized, you change the best way to be a male. For a bonobo, it's best to work on your own and be a solitary male and get access to a group of females and keep other males away from it. So it's not advantageous for a male to work with other males to get more females. It wouldn't work. His best strategy is to try to get one group of females, and often his best route into that group of females is his mother, because his mother is now an attractive female to younger ranking females who aren't related to him. So his mother is now a social passport.
What is the lifespan of bonobos?
It's long. It's about 45 to 55 years. In captivity, it can be a lot longer. So chimpanzees are about the same body size as humans, and they can live about the same length of time.
That means that you have stable communities that you can observe over the passage of many years, I would think.
Yes.
You've been going to the Democratic Republic of the Congo since 1983.
That's right.
There has been much strife in that area of the world in the last decade. It did close off the opportunity to do research for a while, didn't it?
That's right. In the late 1990s, in 98 it closed completely. It was very difficult going through the 1990s with the riots and then with soldiers coming in. Eventually we got evacuated out a couple of times until 1990 when the team had to pull out completely, and we didn't get back in, and I didn't get back in until 2005.
You must have missed your bonobo friends.
Oh yes, in fact we thought that they had all been killed. The stories were that there had been so much hunting, with soldiers being in the area and soldiers having ammunition, that they were hunting anything they could find for bushmeat to eat and to sell. And our animals are used to people, so we were very worried that they had been killed. We'd also heard that bonobos had been killed at other study sites. There's one other study site, the Japanese run a place called Wamba, and there they had 6 communities that they knew, and 3 of them have been completely wiped out by the soldiers. So when I went back in 2005, up until then, no one had seen the bonobos at all, and a colleague of mine, Jeff Dupin, with the African Wildlife Foundation, had gone in to see if he could find the animals and couldn't. So we were really worried about whether or not we'd even be able to find them. And it was so wonderful to get there, not only to find them, but to find that they hadn't been hunted. They were not scared of people. They were having infants, so that basically they had hidden from any soldiers that had come in, and they'd known to stay away from people who were a threat to them.
So despite their comfort level with humans, they had somehow managed to avoid this particular threat.
Yes, and I mean, they're smart enough to do it. When they don't want to be seen, you cannot find them. It goes the other way as well, so that sometimes when I've been following them and I've lost them, which is easy to do when you're trying to follow them through rainforest, they'll come back and look for me, which is very embarrassing. But they know when you're watching them, if you're there, and when you're not there, and they also know how to move and to travel without being found.
Did they manifest any kind of a reaction at seeing you after several years?
Actually, almost none. It was just sort of very careful looking, and then ignored me and just carried on, which was, I think, the perfect reaction. It was just, oh, it's her again. And there wasn't any sort of major response. We do pick up some differences from young animals that we didn't know from before who've come into the group. So females come into the group from outside, and they react. They're sort of obviously different in the way they're reacting to having people around, almost as if they're not understanding while everyone else is being very calm about it. So the new young females in the group really respond to us and react to us, and they'll alarm call and try and move away, but then when the rest of the group's not going to go, they will calm down.
The BBC released a documentary a year ago, I beg your pardon, 3 years ago, March 2006. Was it in fact your re-entry to the DRC that was the subject of that documentary?
That's right. They came with us on that trip and filmed the whole trip in. It was really amazing.
It must have been a large number of people and a lot of equipment moving through the landscape.
Actually, it's only 3 people. So there's a cameraman, there's the assistant, and there's the producer-director. So it was the 3 of us in a dugout canoe for 5 days, which was a real experience. And they just came all the way into the study site.
You've done a lot of consulting as the expert on primate behavior, not only the BBC, but PBS, National Geographic, and others.
Right.
To what do you attribute this insatiable curiosity about bonobos?
I'm not sure. I think partly because they are so different to chimpanzees, and I've been working on them for a very long time, but they are not nearly as well known as chimpanzees. There are not many in captivity, and of course, with their sexual proclivities, they're not very popular in zoos. I mean, people often like to have them, but they often get taken off exhibit and kept somewhere else. Like at San Diego, they keep them at the Wildlife Animal Park more than in the main zoo, because it's not really considered appropriate for young children. So it's sort of like the adult's chimpanzee. But I think it means that they're not as well known in the popular media as chimpanzees are. But that's changing, and I think that's really good.
It's really an overlay of our own prurience or conflicted feelings about sexual behavior, perhaps, that is keeping them out of the public eye.
I think so, definitely.
Do they still face threats now that the civil strife or the internal strife has calmed down? Are there other threatening factors?
The biggest threat is from the bushmeat trade, and it's actually because of the peace process that's going on, so that with the calming down of the war, the trade's increasing, which means that it is now possible to transport animals and meat into cities and to sell them, so that as the economy picks up, it's actually a dangerous time for poachers to come in and try to hunt animals, to take them in to sell them for meat. But we're working again with the African Wildlife Foundation to protect the area, so now we've started having park guards that are patrolling the area where the bonobos are and trying to stop poachers from taking meat.
Do you feel in danger at any point when you are doing your field work?
It can be very difficult when we're traveling in and out. Once we're at our site, no, never, because we're with people that I've known for years and worked with for years, and they regard me as part of their family, and I regard them as part of my family. It's very much, we have sort of a very, very close relationship. And it's been essentially with two families that I've worked with, all the sons of these two families, and we've been pushing and pushing to employ the daughters as well. And finally, this last year, they let us employ some female research assistants, which was a big step for us. But when we're there, they look after us very much and tell us an awful lot about what is going on. The biggest problem is when you're going in and out of cities.
I see, but you clearly have been doing this successfully for a long time now, more than 2 decades.
That's right,
yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to situate your work within the Darwin Bicentennial Series. You'll be giving the 4th talk of 6. Can you talk about the significance of the Darwin celebrations that are being held across the world and how your work fits into it?
I think it's something that's really wonderful for me to see, the celebrations for Darwin. Part of it is because evolution is so well established now and so well accepted that that's really important. But even so, there is still reluctance among some to accept evaluations of human evolution, especially the social perspectives. So I think a lot of people may be comfortable when we talk about fossils or we talk about changes in body form. But when we talk about human behavior and the degree to which that may be evolved, then it can actually get a bit difficult. So I'm always really glad to talk to people in a very general way about what looking at chimpanzees and bonobos can actually tell us about human evolution. Just sort of very straightforward things as we're not like aggressive chimpanzees. We could just as easily choose to be like peaceful bonobos. And that's well within the range of things that we would expect to see during human evolution. So that the idea that we're not tied to any one form is particularly good. And I think bonobos really expand that vision out, of going from sort of an aggressive male model out to something that's much more complicated. But I think also it's very good just to educate the general public, but also faculty in general, that chimpanzees and bonobos and studying primate behavior does tell us something about human behavior. And that's, I think, not as generally accepted as often people might think.
That will be an interesting connection. I hope you'll explore that one in your talk.
I will.
I have to ask you about a class you teach. I know from my own students that it's very, very popular. You regularly teach Anthropology 173, Evolution of Human Sexuality.
Yes, my big sex class.
Your big sex class. It's probably a very large lecture class. What's your
500 students. 500
students,
yes.
And you run this once a year?
Yes, in the winter term.
Do you have the opportunity to make the connection with a bonobo in that class?
We talk a lot about bonobos in that class, but we talk about, when we're looking at, because it's an evolution-based class, we use sort of three main approaches to look at different aspects of human sexual behavior. So we use the comparative approach, which is the standard one in evolutionary terms, that you look at what primates do. So we look at sexual behavior in primates to the degree to which it's similar to humans, and why it's evolved a certain way in humans and why it's evolved a certain way in non-human primates. And then we look at behavior that has, or you can experimentally study what's its evolutionary function. So that looking at experiments, especially in humans, when you're doing evolutionary psychology and giving questionnaires or asking people about sexual behavior, looking at hypotheses for why certain behaviors have evolved and why they haven't. And then we look at a whole range of sexuality-related questions that don't have a real comparator in non-human primates. So we look at in what way are humans different to non-human primates. Why, everything from morphological features like why are humans the only primate without a bone in the penis? And what's the evolution of the morphology of the penis, to what is the evolution of the mating system of humans? That argument, is it monogamy, is it non-monogamy? How much is that tied to investment in a highly dependent offspring? How important is male care in rearing of offspring? What are the changes that happen in males during female pregnancy and birth of offspring? And looking at the degree to which the human mating system differs from our closest relatives, from chimpanzees and bonobos, and the degree of which males are involved in care of offspring.
My guess is if we had a lecture hall on campus that seated more than 500, you would continue to swell the ranks of that class.
Yes, a lot of people are trying to get into it always, and it always stays full.
We're going to have to close on that note. We're looking forward to your lecture. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today.
You're welcome.
We have been talking to Frances White, an associate professor of anthropology at U of O, whose research focuses on primate ecology and evolution. Thank you for watching.